In this video, you're going to learn everything that you need to know about implementing your authentication solution in your Next.js applications with Better Auth. Better Auth is a relatively new authentication library that came out not that long ago actually, but even though it's so new, it's quickly becoming one of the most popular ones and the standard when it comes to authentication in TypeScript and your React and Next.js applications. Now, very quickly, before we get into the video, I just want to mention that I'm very soon going to be launching my own platform code that is going to fundamentally change the way that you learn React, Next.js, and front-end development as a whole. It's currently on waitlist. The waitlist is open, and you can join it by clicking the link in the description. It's going to be at causeandcode.ai. Trust me, you don't want to miss this when it comes out. It's coming out very soon. You should join the waitlist. Now, let's get into the video, and let's talk about authentication in Next.js with Better Auth. Alright, so let's begin. Let's talk about Better Auth and let's see how we can actually use it inside of Next.js. So over here, I'm on the official documentation for Better Auth. So that's going to be at better-auth.com. And here you're going to be able to find all of the information about Better Auth and everything that you need. What we're going to be doing here is we're going to click Get Started to actually start installing this library into our project. So we're going to come here, we're going to go to Installation, and here we're pretty much going to follow this guide up to a certain point. Then we're going to have to jump into the specific Next.js section just to see how it actually works with Next.js. And then what we're going to be doing is we're going to be implementing a simple application that has the ability for a user to log in, to log out, to create an account, and to actually see the logged in state of the user. This is kind of the main functionality that you typically want to have in your application when it comes to authentication, and I'm going to show you everything that you need to be able to implement that with Better Auth. So the first thing that we want is we want to install the actual Better Auth library. Now I'm using npm, but whatever you're using, just copy the correct command for it. And here I'm going to go to my application. I have here a very simple application setup. Let me just clear everything over here. Let's put pnpm add Better Auth and let's install our Better Auth library. Now, what I also want to do is I want to install Better SQLite 3 because we're going to be using SQLite as our database. Now, you don't have to do this. Actually, Better Auth supports any different kind of database, and they also plug into an ORM. So if you're using, for example, Prisma or Drizzle, it supports it out of the box. But for the simplicity of this tutorial, I just want to keep it focused on Better Auth and the authentication. So we're going to be using SQLite 3, which is why I need to install the SQLite library. Great, so now the next step is going to be to actually set up some environment variables. Now, I already did this. I already have this set up in my project, but you want to do this in your own project. So you need to set up two environment variables. The first one is going to be the Better Auth secret. This is simply the variable that it's going to use to actually encrypt and to do all of the magic when it comes to authentication in your application. So you can put anything that you want in here. Make sure that it has some length to it, right? And you can even click Generate Secret here if you just want to generate one on the fly. This is really handy. Just put this inside of your .env file wherever it actually applies. If you're using Next.js, right, it's going to be env.local and then perhaps n.production if you're using that format for your environment files. Next up, what you also need is you need to set the Better Auth URL. So this is going to be the URL of the backend of your application. So in this case, typically with Next.js, that's going to be localhost and then 3000. That's going to be in development. Now in production, of course, you're going to have a domain name. So make sure to put that and change that value whenever you run for production. In our case, this is the only thing that I have in my application because we're doing this only in development. And so in development for Next.js, it's going to be localhost and then 3000. Then the next step is to create a Better Auth instance. Now this one is going to be for the server, right? So Better Auth is an authentication library. A lot of the work for it is going to happen on the server, which is great because Next.js is pretty much almost all on the server. If you consider server components and whatnot, yes, there is some client functionality, but a lot of the work when it comes to actually authenticating, signing in the user and stuff like that is going to happen in the server. And all of that will happen using this Better Auth instance that we now have to create. So what we have to do is we have to create a file named auth.ts in one of these locations. So either the project root, a lib folder, or a utils folder. In our case, what we're going to do is we're going to put it here in the lib folder. I generally like to consider this as like the libraries folder. I mean, that's really what it is. But here I would put anything related to a library like authentication, like like my database, for example, and other potential things. So the lib folder makes sense for our auth file over here. And really what we need to do is we just need to put this over here. Now, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to copy this piece of code over here because I'm specifically using SQLite, right? So here, all we have to do is create this auth variable that we're also going to export. This is going to use the Better Auth function from Better Auth. So that's essentially creating the client here. And then we can specify whatever database that we want. In our case, we're going to do exactly this. We're going to specify a Better SQLite database that's going to be called SQLite.db. Now, if you're using Postgres, right, this would be how it looks like. If you're using MySQL, this is how it will look like. Or if you're using Drizzle, again, they have adapters for it. So you can just run this and it's directly going to plug into your Drizzle instance. Same for Prisma and same for MongoDB as well. This is what makes Better Auth so great, is that it simply integrates with everything that you already probably have. So in our case, we're going to copy this over here, and actually no, it is this one. So I'm just going to copy this, go back to my application, open up here the folder. I'm going to go directly inside of src, inside of lib, and see, I already have some utilities. This is just the cn function from setcn, which is fine. Here, I'm just going to create a new file, auth.ts, and I'm going to paste this code over here. Now I realize I copied the wrong one. That was my mistake. Let's go back to SQLite. And let's copy this one and replace everything. And now we should be good to go. Here, I realize I'm missing the types for Better SQLite 3, which is fine. We can just copy them, go back here, pnpm add -d, and then types Better SQLite 3. That should install all of my types and it should automatically refresh this. There we go. Everything is great. Now we have our server Better Auth instance, which we can export and we can directly use inside of our server stuff in our Next.js application. Now, before we continue with the rest of this video, I just want to take a very quick moment to talk about the sponsor of today's video, Brilliant. Brilliant is a learning platform that helps you become a better thinker and problem solver, and they have thousands of visual interactive lessons covering a wide range of topics like math, science, programming, data analysis, and AI. Brilliant's platform is designed to be uniquely effective. Each lesson that you have on there is filled with hands-on problem solving that actually lets you play with the concepts that you're learning, which is a method that has been proven to be 6 times more effective than watching your traditional lecture video. Their courses are designed to build your understanding from the ground up, and they actually mix engaging challenges with competitive features and also daily reminders to help you stay consistent. Plus, all of the content on Brilliant is crafted by an award-winning team of teachers, researchers, and professionals from places such as Stanford, MIT, Microsoft, Google, and more. And if you're into programming, they also have a growing collection of programming courses, which is a phenomenal way to build timeless problem-solving skills to really be able to thrive in this ever-evolving world of programming. From learning Python to developing an intuition for computer logic, you're going to get hands-on experience with real programs, and you're going to learn to think like a real programmer. To try everything that Brilliant has to offer for free, you can go to brilliant.org/causeandsolutions, or you can scan the QR code on the screen, or you can simply click the first link in the description. And for everyone watching my videos, Brilliant is actually offering 20% off an annual premium subscription, which basically gives you unlimited daily access to everything that Brilliant has to offer. Thank you once again to Brilliant for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back to talking about authentication with Better Auth in Next.js. The next step is going to be to create our database tables. Now, this is something really important when it comes to Better Auth. So Better Auth directly integrates with your existing database and your existing data, right? So here we specified our database here. Basically, all of our users and all of these sessions and all of the tables and data that we need when it comes to authenticating our users are going to get stored inside of our database alongside all of our other data. And that's really cool about Better Auth, is it integrates directly with what you have. And so the way that we're going to do that is we're going to be using the CLI from Better Auth. This is essentially going to allow us to run this generate command, which is going to generate a SQL file with all of the tables, all of the data that we need to actually store our users. And we're going to see this in just a moment. And then we can call the migrate function to actually make that migration to the database, which is really cool because now we're going to have new tables, new columns in our database to support our authentication. So what we need to do is we need to copy this command over here, and we need to come here to our terminal, and we can just run this command. Now this is going to take some time. It's going going to maybe ask you to install the CLI, which we're going to press yes to. We're going to install the CLI, and then you're going to see that it's going to generate our migrations. So here it's asking me, do I want to generate the schema to Better Auth migrations? And then this file, I'm going to press yes because I want to do that. And there we go. Now it says schema was generated successfully. Great. So now let's actually look at that schema to see what it actually generated, because it's really important so that you understand how Better Auth actually works. So I'm going to close this and open up here my files, and now we have a new folder inside of our Next.js application, which is called Better Auth and then migrations. And here we have the file that was just generated. So here, if I open up this file, we're going to see that this is straight up SQL, right? This is basically creating tables over here and specifying the columns of those tables. And we can see here exactly what Better Auth is doing. And more importantly, we can see what Better Auth needs to actually handle our authentication. So if you look here, you're going to see things that you would typically expect if you're doing authentication. Even if you're not doing it with Better Auth, you would typically have something like this in your database, because these are the fundamental pieces of data that you need to handle your authentication. And so here, right, we're creating a table user. So this is the actual table of our authenticated user, right? Which will have an ID property. It will have a name property, an email property, whether or not the email is verified, right? We need to store that property to be able to track that, an image potentially, and then create it at and update it at as the fields. Then we're creating a session here, which is basically going to keep track of the user session, right? So if the user is logged in, they'll get a session created for them, and that's what we use to actually track it. And this one has an ID, has an expires at property, has a token, right? So Better Auth is automatically going to handle all of the tokens for you, and it's going to use this database column here to actually do that. And then it has all of these other properties here. We also have an account table, similar idea, right? We also have here the access token and the refresh token, right? So we know when it comes to authentication, we have to work with access and refresh tokens. That's where they're going to be stored. And finally, we have a verification table, which is used for verifying your specific user. And so the great thing is all of this is done automatically for you by Better Auth. You don't have to create these tables yourself. You don't have to determine what fields you want to put, what properties, what columns you want to put on them. Everything is automatically handled by Better Auth, and you're going to see that this is the theme with Better Auth. It pretty much does everything that you want and that you would expect from authentication, while still giving you complete control, because this goes directly into our database with our own data, and we can do whatever we want with it. So now that we have our migration file, what we need to do is we need to come in here and run the migrate file to actually apply this migration to our database to actually create our tables. So I'm going to come in here and then run the migration command. And this is also going to take a little bit of time. This is going to tell me what effects it's going to have on the database. So here we're going to basically add all of these properties on the user table. We've already seen this, so we can just press yes and just let the migration happen successfully. And now our SQLite database here, if you can see it, I'm not going to open it because you can't really open it in VSCode, in Cursor rather, but this one now has all of our data to be able to support authentication. Great. So now with that, we can move on to setting up our different authentication methods. Now, this is completely going to depend on your application and what you actually want out of Better Auth. Like I said in the introduction, Better Auth supports all of these different kinds of authentication. So pick the ones that you actually want to support in your application. For example, you can pick email and password. You can pick social providers like GitHub or Gmail or whatever else that you want. And then you can go and set up these individual providers by providing the client IDs and the client secrets. We're not going to be doing this in this video because I want to keep things simple and focused on Better Auth. So we're only going to be doing the email and password because that is going to be sufficient so that you understand how Better Auth actually works. So we're just going to copy this property over here, the email and the password, and we're going to go back here to our Better Auth instance over here, and I'm just going to add it here, email and password, and there you go, we are good to go. So now our auth instance, our Better Auth, is going to support email and password by default without us really having to do anything else besides specifying this property here. Great. Now with this, we're pretty much done with the basic setup of Better Auth. Now what we can do is we can move on to the Next.js documentation to see what's specifically different and what specifically do we have to add to make it work with our Next.js application. So I'm going to come in here into integrations and I'm going to find here Next.js just to find it in just a moment. There it is, Next.js. And now we're going to go here and we're going to look what we actually need for Next.js. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to create an API route. What this is essentially going to do, and this is the power really of Better Auth, is that this is going to create all of the endpoints that we need to support authentication. That means our endpoints like signing up a user, right? So auth/sign up, for example, signing in a user, right? Same concept, just to sign in a user that already exists, and also the logout, right? There's a bunch more things, but the ones that we're concerned about is sign in, sign up, and then logout. And in Next.js, right, we can put things inside of the API folder, and everything that we put in there, all of the root.ts files, they essentially become API endpoints that we can hit from our application or even expose to the public. And what we're doing here with this piece of code here is this is literally one line of code that is going to create all of these endpoints that I just set for us automatically with all of the logic required within them. All that we have to do is just use this toNext.js handler, and everything else is handled automatically for us. This is the power of Better Auth. And the way that we can apply this to any number of authentication routes is by using this syntax over here for our file path, right? So in Next.js, right, whatever the file path is here, that's the actual endpoint that is going to be available and exposed to the public. And if you put here square brackets and then ... all, this is essentially acting as a catch-all route. So this is nested under the auth endpoint here. So we're basically saying that for any route under auth, so auth/whatever, sign in, sign up, log out, whatever, we're going to be running this code over here, which is exactly what we want, right? Because otherwise, if we were doing this manually, we would have to actually implement the logic of those endpoints one by one automatically. Now with Better Auth, we don't have to do that because we can directly use the Next.js handler, and it does it for us automatically using this catch-all route. And so let's do it. That's what we have to do now. So we're going to make a file here in API auth and then all and then root, right? So let's come here to our application. Let's go into src app, and here we're going to make a new file. We're going to do API auth and then square brackets ... all, close the square bracket, and then do root.ts. And here we're going to paste the code that we just had, and we're going to save this. So what this is doing is this is using the toNext.js handler from Better Auth/Next.js. So that's the specific Next.js integration. We're then going to be passing and importing the auth client. Remember the server client. We're going to be passing the auth.handler to this. And this is simply going to return to us a get function and a post function that we can just export. And this is exactly how you would typically create any endpoint in Next.js. You create either a get function, a post function, or whatever. You export it from a root.ts file inside of the API folder, and then you have an endpoint. We're doing the same exact thing, but now Better Auth is actually implementing and creating all of these endpoints. Then after that, the next step is going to be to create a client. Now I am going to skip this for now, and I'm going to put this at the end of the video. And I'm going to continue here with the server stuff simply because the server stuff is usually the bulk of the authentication stuff that you're going to be doing in your Next.js application, right? Because when you have server components, you can fetch the data on the server, you can create server actions to update the data on the server as well. So we don't actually necessarily need the client. Now it's true that in a real application, you will eventually need a client for some components. You will have client components in your application. So we will look at this, but I'll leave that at the end of the video and focus on just the server stuff, at least for now. So now let's actually look at how we actually use Better Auth, because so far the only thing that we've been doing is actually setting it up. We set up our server instance and then we set up our server endpoints in Next.js, but we haven't actually used them. So now it's time to actually use them, and we're going to be using them in both server components and server actions. Now, instead of showing you here this documentation, I'm actually going to take it directly to the project that we have, the Next.js project, and I'm actually going to show you by actually implementing it directly. I think that's going to be a little bit better so that you understand, because I feel that we've looked enough at the documentation to set up Better Auth and everything that it requires. But the only thing that we still need from the documentation is this one here. We just need to get the next cookies over here. This is basically going to make it so that all of the cookies get updated correctly as we're working and doing things with regards to authentication in our Next.js application. So I'm just going to copy this over here, this plugins and then next cookies, and we're going to go here to our Better Auth instance over here, and I'm just going to put it right here, plugin next cookies, and we're going to import this from Better Auth/Next.js. That's the only thing that we need to do. Cool. So now what we want to do is actually build and implement the functionality for a user to sign up to our application, to then sign in to that application, and also to log out of the application. And finally, we're also going to be implementing the ability to get the current session of the user. So we now have a session in a database. We want to get that session to know if a user is authenticated or not, to actually be able to show it inside of the UI of our application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here inside of app, and here I'm just going to create a new file in a new folder that we're going to call actions. And here I'm going to do auth.ts. This is going to be a server action file. So we'll need to put here at the top, use server. And in here, we're going to create and export a couple of server actions. So functions that will basically sign in, sign up, and then log out to the user. And now here you're going to see the power of Better Auth and how it makes this super simple to integrate all of this functionality into our application. So the first thing that I'm going to start with is the sign up action function. So this is going to be a server action. So we're going to do export and then function, sign up action. The data here is going to be form data because we're directly going to be plugging this inside of a form. And now in here, we can actually do the logic of getting our actual data from the form. So we'll need here an email, of course. We'll need to get the email from formdata.email. We're also going to need to get const the password from the formdata.getPassword. And also, I'm also going to get const the name from formdata as well. So all of these properties are going to have to be fields inside of a form. We're going to get them over here inside of these variables, and then we're going to pass them to Better Auth. Now in here, just for the simplicity of this video, I'm not really concerned about validating the email, right? That it's a correct email and stuff like that. We're not doing that. Usually in a real application, you would, and you would typically maybe use something like Zot for it. Again, let's assume that all of these are correctly validated just to keep it simple for the tutorial and not overcomplicate ourselves. And now the only thing that we really need to do is we basically need to send these to our backend, right? We have the email, the password, and the name. We want to sign up a user. So regardless, even if we were not using Better Auth, if we were using something else, we need to send these values to our backend to hit some sort of endpoint, right? So no matter how we're doing things, we still have to do that. Now, the cool thing about Better Auth is sending this to an actual backend is super simple. What we can do is we can do here await, and then we can do auth, which is going to be our server Better Auth instance, which will import. Then we can do .api. We can access the API over here, and we can do dot and then sign up. And you can see all of the functionalities that we have here. We can get account info. We can change the email, change the password, forget the password, right? Get a session. There's all of these different properties that we can use, all of these different functions that we can call. And actually, all of these map to specific endpoints of Better Auth. Again, endpoints that we have in our Next.js application, but endpoints that we did not create or implement ourselves because we were using this Next.js handler here, and it's all done automatically for us. And that's really the beauty of using Better Auth is you can just call here, sign up, and then sign up email, right, to sign up with the email. And then all that you have to do is actually pass the values. And here we're going to have to pass them as the body property over here. We can pass the email, we can pass the password and the name, and we can pass them directly here. Now this function needs to be an asynchronous function. So we'll just make this asynchronous. And now this is directly going to call the sign up email endpoint that we have and sign the user in with this email, with this password, and with this name. And then the only thing that we have to do, because we're working in Next.js, we're going to assume that this action is going to be called from a /signup page. So we just want to redirect the user to the home page, right? And we can import the redirect directly from Next navigation, and that's it. And with this, we've now just implemented the ability for a user to sign up to our application. And so with this, we can actually take all of this code and we can also implement in the same way the sign in action. And here I'm just going to paste it. I'm going to replace this with sign in, right? Sign in action. We're going to take the same form data here, except we're not going to be taking the name because you don't need the name to sign in. And here, instead of calling sign up, we're going to call sign in. And we're just going to return the name, remove the name over here. And that's it. It's the same thing. We're just calling a different endpoint. Again, using auth.api, the Better Auth server instance, and then calling here redirect. And finally, we can now come in here and implement our sign out action, which is the final missing piece of this puzzle. This will be mostly the same, just with a slight difference. So I'm going to do export async function and then sign out action. And here, what we're going to do is we're going to do await auth.api.sign out. And here, we just have to provide it here specifically. We have to give it here the headers because it doesn't automatically get the headers. That's just a specific quirk of Better Auth and Next.js. And here we can just do await and then headers from next/headers. This is basically going to get the headers and we're just passing them here to Better Auth. That's it. You can in Next.js access the headers using this function here. We're just passing it here directly to Better Auth. It needs this to be able to actually sign out. And then of course we can just come here and redirect the user. Also, we're going to redirect them to the home page. So that's it. Now we have 3 different actions: sign up, sign in, and then sign out. And with this, we can implement a fully working authentication solution in our application. So now with this, the only thing left is really to create the UI for this. So to create our actual React components to allow the user to basically call all of these actions. So let's start here with the sign up action. I'm going to come here inside of the Explorer. I'm going to go inside of app, and here I'm just going to create a new file in a new folder that we're going to put sign up and then page.tsx. And here I'm just going to copy and paste some markup that I have. This is pretty simple. This is just our sign up page component. It has a form over here and we're passing the sign up action as the action property. Because again, this is an action. It will receive the form data over here. So we can pass it to a form. And then I have a couple of inputs here, one for the name, the email and the password, and then a button to actually submit the form. We're not really concerned with any form library or any validation or stuff like that. Again, this is purely so that we can see the authentication in action. Then we're going to do the same exact thing with the sign in page. So again, create a new file in a new folder, sign in page.tsx, and in here I'm going to paste the same code. This is also a form. It calls the sign in action as the action property, and here we only have the email and then the password and also our button to submit the form. Now, finally, we can come here to our main page. So this is just the entry point, the root page of our application. And now here, what we want to do is we just want to actually show the current state of the user. Is the user currently signed in? And if so, we want to create them and show them some buttons to either go to the sign up or the sign in page. And if they're not signed in, or actually we're going to show those buttons if they're not signed in. If they are signed in, we're going to show them a logout button to basically allow them to log out. And then we should be able to have a fully working application. We can sign up, create an account, we can sign in, and then we can also press logout and we can see the current state of the authenticated user directly inside of this homepage over here. So for that, what we need to first do is we need to get the actual session of the user, right? So over here, we created some actions to actually update that session, right? To do things to it, to sign up the user and so on. Now what we need to do is access that current state, and accessing the current state is also the same exact simplicity. It's as easy as creating our actions to actually modify the session. And that's actually going to be really simple. So we can come in here, we can do const session. Here we're going to call await, and this we're going to get auth, and we're going to import our server instance here, .api.get, and here we're going to do get session. And the only thing that we need to do here is also we need to pass the headers here. So I'm just going to import from next headers, and I'm going to pass the headers, and then we're going to make this function asynchronous. This is now going to be the session of the actual user. So this is making an API endpoint call to get the session, and it's obviously going to check the headers, right? That's why we're passing the headers here. It's going to check the actual headers. Is there a token there? It's going to validate that token, refresh it if it needs, and it's going to return to us, is there a session for the user? Is the user currently signed in or are they not? And then what we can do is we can just get rid of all of this code here, and I have just here some markup. So if we don't have a session, so if we're currently logged out, we're just going to import our button over here. We're going to import the link component from next link, and then we're going to render out this piece of code here. This is simply going to render out the button to both sign up and then sign in. Each one is going to link to the sign up page where we created our actual form in our page, and the same for the sign in. And then if we do have a session, we're going to return this piece of code over here. That's going to be a very similar looking UI. We're also going to put Gaussian solutions, but now we're going to put the user ID, which we're going to get from session.user.id. So now we have access to our user ID, so we can actually use it in our application. We can do anything that we want with it. And then we're also going to have a form, which we'll need to call the sign out action, which we can import because we have it created. And this is going to be our log out button. And that's it. With this, now we have a fully working UI. Just a reminder, all of this is server components, right? So all of this happens completely on the server. We're still going to look at the client in just a moment, but we have a fully working user interface and we have a fully working API endpoint with all of the server actions to do all of the things that we need when it comes to authentication. So let's run the application pm dev and let's see this in action and see if this actually works. So I'm going to go here to localhost, and this one's running on port 3000. Let it load for just a second. Next.js is notorious for being very slow in development. So there we go. We have cause and solutions. We're currently not signed into the application. So the session here has not evaluated to anything. So right, this call here is null, right, or undefined, whatever. So we're showing off this UI here, which means that we can click sign up, for example, and we can go to the sign up page and actually create an account in our application. So let's create an account. Let's do Darius. That's my name. Email is going to be demo@causeandsolutions.io. And here I'm going to put Causen Solutions, and I'm going to sign up. And there we go. Now we're signed in. We're redirected automatically to the homepage. And now we actually have our user ID. Now what's cool about this is now actually stored, right? So if I refresh the page, we're still getting that user ID. The session here now is actually evaluating to the current sign-in session. So this is your sign-up user, right? So with this, you can now show certain parts of the application that were currently blocked. You can do anything on behalf of the user. You can fetch the user's data and stuff like that, right? You have the user ID and you can directly do it. See how easy that was? We can also press logout here, which is going to log us out. And again, if I refresh the page, now we're currently logged out. And now we can actually go here and sign in, right, to see that the sign in actually works. So let me also show you something. I'm going to put here the email, but what I'm going to put is I'm going to put a wrong password. Let's just type whatever here. Let me show you what actually happens. We're going to sign in here. And for this, we'll actually need to open up here our console. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. Let's clear everything. Let's press sign in. Remember, this is a false password, a password that is incorrect. So I'm going to press sign in here and look at this uncaught API error, invalid email or password. Now, this is something that, of course, you would expect, right? If the password is invalid, you would expect an API error to actually come. But the thing is, we did not implement this at all. This is directly coming from the API error, right? From Better Auth directly. We didn't have to do this, right? Better Auth has a bunch of different checks, a bunch of different logic to handle all of these edge cases. You don't have to manage them. This is directly coming from the fact that we have this Next.js handler here, which has all of the logic of the API endpoint of Better Auth, including the ability to check and validate a user's password. And so this is really, really cool because, again, we control all of our data. Our users are stored in our actual database. Our endpoints are in our application. We're not calling some external service, right, that maybe charges us for the amount of users or the amount of API calls that we have. There's none of that. Everything is directly integrated with what we already have. But we're getting all of this functionality for free. Literally for free. We're not paying for this. We're getting a robust authentication solution integrated into our application completely for free. That's amazing. And so let's now close this, right? And let's actually log in correctly. So here I'm going to put this and I'm going to do Causen Solutions, the correct password this time. And now we're logged in and it validated that I actually have a user. And again, we're seeing the same exact ID over here. There we go. With this, we now have a fully working authentication solution using Better Auth in our Next.js application. If we look here, actually, I wanted to show you because this is really cool and important as well. If you look here in our application and we go to cookies and we go to our actual endpoint, localhost, and then here 3001, you're going to see here that we have the Better Auth session, right? This is our actual user session. This is what automatically gets sent through the headers to Better Auth. It gets validated and stuff like that. That's how we're able to actually get this ID over here. If we didn't have this session, right, we wouldn't be able to get this ID. Better Auth is handling all of that automatically for us. This is really cool, and that's why Better Auth has gained so much popularity, and that's why it's quickly becoming the standard for authentications with TypeScript in Next.js and really other applications. Now, finally, the last thing that I will show you, because I did promise you, let's quickly look at the client and how this works at the client, because this is also important because, again, in a real world React application, Next.js application rather, you're not only going to be doing things on the server, you also need to be doing things on the client as well. Now, when it comes to the client here, it's pretty much similar. It follows the same principles. The only thing that you have to do is to create an auth client here. So you just create here this auth client inside of lib and then auth client, right? And then you use this function here, create auth client. And this is coming directly from Better Auth/React. So this is going to integrate to your React client components. So you can also use and access the session and do things on the client side of your app. application. So for example, here I went back to the get started and then basic usage. This is happening here on the client. So this is a different way to sign up the user if you were using client components. You instead import this auth client over here, and then you just do auth client.signup. Here you're not going through the .api like we did before because you're not directly hitting that same API endpoint. I mean, you are, but you're doing it slightly differently. And then you call email, and then here you pass all of the properties that you might want, and then you have your callbacks here. These are basically client callbacks. So on request, you control loading spinner. On success, you can redirect to something or do whatever you want with the user. And then on error, of course, you can actually handle the user and show to the user that something went wrong. And then here you can actually configure this to your heart's content, right? I'll let you explore the documentation to see exactly how you want to configure this. To sign in a user, it's the same thing. You just call the signin.email function. Again, you pass all of these values here, and then you can even remember the user and stuff like that. And with this, that's pretty much it. You've seen how to integrate Better Auth, how to install the library, how to set up your database, run your migrations, create the server instance, right, the server client, and then actually create the endpoints. And then we've seen how to actually use those endpoints using server actions. You also know how to do exactly the same thing now on the client if you need to work with this and do something on the client components as well. So you're pretty equipped to now go and actually use this library inside of your projects and then build upon it and actually integrate it the way that you specifically want to integrate it for your application. I would highly recommend that you go and look at the documentation of Better Auth because again, there's a lot more that I haven't covered in this video, even though I feel that I covered quite in depth what Better Auth is and how you actually want to use it. But again, if you want to do things like social sign-on, right, like signing in with GitHub and stuff like that, go and look at the documentation. They have it. I'm not sure exactly where it is, but they have it. OAuth, I believe it is, right? You can see how you can actually use it, right? All the configuration that you might need. Again, I'm not going into that for this video. That's outside of the scope of this video, but Better Auth provides it, and whatever your use case is, you're probably covered. And so that's it. That's all that I have for this video. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to leave it a big thumbs up. You can also click here to subscribe, or you can click here to watch a different video of mine that YouTube seems to think that you're really going to enjoy. With that being said, my name has been Darius Kozin. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.